Oh, Rich,
Oh, Rich.
hello.
Hello. Hey, Martin. How are you?
I'm good. So you have forgiven me for the Malaysia show last week.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, that was bad. I was just in the midst of nowhere in Malaysia and trying to get reception, and yeah, it was. I was on and off. Was very bad. No, yeah, but now better. I'm back in
yeah,
Singapore,
yeah. No
and
problem. No
yeah,
worries.
thanks a lot. Okay, good. Yeah, I just looked through my thing because currently I find it quite depressing with what is going on in Germany and also in the world economy. The the news are bringing up the news like now 50% of that pipeline from the UAE to around the Strait of Hormuz is finished, and that's not good news because it just means that everybody is thinking that this war will not end so soon. So they are now accelerating the pipeline, and the pipeline will just not be able to transport as much as what the ships have done so far.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Then also Germany is in very bad shape because they now see. Have you tried out the German car industry analyzer? The, the four triggers.
Yeah, yeah.
It,
Um,
and and you can compare dates with it, and I find that quite exciting because then you see how it's getting better or worse, and it only became worse.
yeah. I'll tell you. I mean, it just seems like. Um, I mean, there's only one way to get us out of this situation, and we've got to go in there and get rid of that entire regime.
Huh, okay, but that's quite tough because it's more than Afghanistan.
Well, it's the only way because they're going to hold the world hostage on the
Yes.
Strait of Hormuz. And now, I don't know if you've seen the articles related to they're threatening all the underwater, data lines and cables, for power.
Uh-huh. No, I've not
So,
seen, but I'm not surprised. But if that happens, that brings the trigger number four further down. Yeah. So.
yeah, so we've gone from, you know, basically rockets and missiles to, sea-based, surface attacks to underwater, threats now, to the
Hmm.
cable, communications for the globe. Um, I mean, there's just no there's just no way around it. I mean,
Hmm.
we can't have these guys collecting a fee for every ship that goes by. I mean, that's ludicrous.
In Germany, in Denmark, there was something in place until the 2 centuries ago. The Danish held the Russians and the Finnish and the Germans hostage because there's some Sund between the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, and they charged for letting ships through, and that led to a war, which was ultimately lost by Denmark, and then it's quite a famous situation that is similar. And as being in Singapore, Indonesia tried to do the same thing. So there's the Straits of Malacca, which is a small another bottleneck between Singapore and Malaysia, between Indonesia and Malaysia, and about is it 60% of the world sea traffic goes through that one? So it's even more intense than the Straits of Suez and Suez Canal, and yeah. So there are also discussion going on. So now all the countries try to get their share, but we are here for the 4x4. Jürgen Brügel is here. Hello. Jürgen is a famous inventor of the BMW company. And for hello, Jürgen. Good to have you here.
Hello all.
Yeah. So I don't know whether you have noticed, but I have written a trigger analyzer for the German car industry on GPT, and you can now, at any date in the past, determine what color the respective trigger was for the car industry, and it became only worse over the past 3 years or so, I can say. So it's now quite a bad situation. Can you somehow confirm that, or is it? How can you see that? Because you are in Germany right now, right?
Yeah, I'm in Germany, but I did not really understand the question. The car industry trigger, what color? What do you mean? You mean
Okay.
paint color or?
No. I've written, you can say, a, a custom GPT on the OpenAI surface, and it's called Deutsche Autoindustrie Trigger Analyzer. And when you click and ask what it does, it says that I'm not analyzing headlines, but I'm looking into the articles, and it does a worldwide search about what is happening on German soil. And that analysis is done for 4 triggers. And the 4 triggers are, wait, I read to you. First, the labor and regional stress. The trigger tests what is going on the labor market, and what happens in the regions, employment and regional labor stress, right? And then the trigger checks whether the automotive jobs in Germany are being lost, hollowed out, or gradually shifted away. And important thing is that the official unemployment alone is not enough. The analysis also looks at people that transfer into retirement or early retirement, and that also applies to you, I believe, right? So
Yes.
there can be the unemployment, the total unemployment rate for Germany can remain constant if only enough people leave the country, which is happening. It's about 200,000 per year, and if enough people are going into retirement, then the unemployment rate would be the same. But still, there are workplaces lost, and the what the trigger analysis does is it looks at layoffs at OEMs and suppliers, at plant closures, short-time work, Kurzarbeit, which is a subsidy by the government when a company decides to reduce the work hours, hiring freezes and non-replacement of retirees, early retirement and severance programs, transfer of functions abroad, loss of engineering and R&D roles in Germany, and then shrinking industrial employment in automotive regions. And the key regions are Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, Wolfsburg, Stuttgart region, Ingolstadt, Dingolfing, Landau, and Lower Saxony. Core question is, are high-value industrial jobs remaining in Germany long-term or not? That's one of the triggers. And then the next one is industrial relocation and China exposure. This trigger measures whether investment, production, and future technologies are moving away from Germany. And interesting enough, if you look at the newspapers in a broad sense, there's a lot of information available, but you only need to pull it together, and the GPT does it automatically. It doesn't look at headlines, but it looks at the content of the articles. And the third trigger is technology on competitiveness disruption. And this trigger evaluates whether German automakers are falling behind technologically. So the core question is, are German manufacturers losing technological competitiveness? And it's all about electric vehicles, mostly, and autonomous driving. And then the fourth trigger would be financial and production stress. And this trigger measures whether operational weakness is becoming financially and industrially visible. And like profit warnings, declining production volumes, weak export demands, supplier insolvencies, and then canceled or delayed battery or EV electric vehicle projects, or the dealer inventory buildup, and things like that. And the companies closely watched are, of course, the OEMs like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, and Audi, but also the tier one suppliers like Bosch, Continental, ZF, Schaeffler, and Mahle. And the core question is this a normal cyclical weakness or is it the start of a structural industrial deterioration? And for each trigger, there are 5 values from 0 to, which means non-active, to 4 systemic critical. And the overall status is green, yellow, orange, and red. And you can also compare, and I'm now compare 20 May 2026 with. And you give me a date, please, Jürgen, you want to compare with?
Like 2 years ago.
Okay, 20 May 2024. I've put the link into the 4x4 LinkedIn group so that you can all try it out. It's now working and pulling the information together. And just while this thing is working here, a large improvement has been brought in by Rich McDonald, who is also here today, and he has suggested to use a pestle approach. And a pestle approach is more. Maybe Rich, you say a few words about that one. I can also look it up, but I believe it's better to hear it from the horse's mouth, right?
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 typical analysis structures. One is PEST, P-E-S-T, and then there's a pestle. And pestle is just an extension of PEST, if you would, if you think about it in that term. So PEST, what that stands for, it's an acronym, or pestle, excuse me, is an acronym, just as PEST is. But the acronym breaks down as to P for political, E for economic, S for societal, T for technology. The other E is environmental, and then the L is for legal. And when you take a look at that structure and you put a industry under that scope, you then can see all the trends and drivers of an industry. So it's an excellent way to view the industry dynamics, if you would, of any industry under
Yep.
using that format.
I understood that it gives you can also see what influences what in what sequence.
Yeah, that's called a trend and driver.
Yeah, and I find it quite good. To me, that tool was too powerful to understand immediately, but I understood that you can use the same features that my 4 trigger analysis is using to put into the pestle, and then you would get a much better insight into the dynamics of the system. And
Exactly.
you can, and you can do it for all sorts of industries.
Sure.
Hey, Martin.
Now wait, let Rich finish, please, first, Michael.
My recommendation, Martin, was, and maybe I didn't say it strong enough to you, was to sort of restructure your triggers into each of those categories of the pestle. Right?
Yeah, and in addition, because what I find that the simple 4 trigger analysis is good because you really see immediately what is going on and what deteriorates. But if you want to find out more, I give you an example. I found a transition mechanism, right? For example, political, the pestle, right? The EU CO2 rules tighten. That would provide a technology, a T trigger, accelerated EV transition. And that for the economy means a higher capital expenditure. And societal means the internal combustion engine supplier layoff. And that would cause regional stress in Baden-Württemberg, for example. And that again, to the F, the financial, it means the supplier insolvencies. And without pestle, these relationships or the interactions are much harder to map. So you would only see, does it go up or down, but not, it doesn't say why. And that's why I like the pestle so much. It's only the alterations to the system prompt in my AI system are so how to say so numerous that it exceeds the total characters of the system prompt. I have only 8,000 characters, and I'm using currently 5,000. And when I put your Pestle system in, then I'm at 9,000 or 10,000. So I need to think about how to reduce the total size. And that's why I've not done it. But I have created a standalone Pestle generator. It's also there. And I've sent you the link, and it's probably also in the 4x4. And you can use that one for any industry, but it's not as specialized as the 4 trigger analysis for the German soil automotive industry. And now let me go back to our analysis. So, and I tell you now what is the outcome. German auto industry trigger comparison, 20th May 2024 versus 20th of May 2026. Employment and regional labor stress, 20th of May 2024, it was 2. 20th of May 2026 is 3. And the direction is worsening. Then the industrial relocation and China exposure in May 2024 was 2. In May 2026, it was 4, strongly worsening. Then and 4 is the highest value that you can have, the worst value, if you want to say so. Technology and competitiveness disruption is in May 2024 was 2, and in May 26 is 3 today, so it's worsening. And financial and production stress in May 24 was 2, and today it's 3, so it's also worsening. And I can give you more insights. And employment and regional labor stress situation 2 years ago, early restructuring phase, OEM still protected by strong internal combustion engine cash flow, layoffs concentrated mostly at suppliers, employment erosion partially hidden through retirement, attrition, voluntary exits, and reduced hiring. The key indicators in 24 was Bosch, CF, Sound of ZF, Continental announced major restructuring programs. The EV, electric vehicle transition, reduced demand for drivetrain-related labor, and German production volume still below pre-2019 levels. And Kurzarbeit and hiring freeze is visible in only parts of the supplier network, while today Volkswagen is planning up to 50,000 job reductions by 2030. Bosch and CF continue large restructuring waves and layoffs. Verband Deutscher Automobilbauer related VDA reporting indicates 55,000 auto sector jobs already lost in recent years. Investment hesitation among suppliers rising sharply means they don't buy new tools and machines. Growing concern around Wolfsburg and Stuttgart exposure. Important structural change in 2026. It's increasingly affects more and core OEM structures. Triggers core 3, and so on for everything. And I find that quite telling. Though there's not much headroom left overall for triggers. And yeah, Jürgen, you said the 2 years. Why did you choose 2 years and not 5, for example?
The 2 years was just the rebound from Corona. It's easy, this pre-Corona and post-Corona, and there's a big step. But the feeling is that in the last 2 years, the speed, how production sites and people are being fired is increasing dramatically. Today, Varta announced to close a factory. They were not producing for automotive, but for Apple. And the government spent 300 million euros subsidizing. Then I don't know, a couple of hundred jobs are being lost, and all these things. And every day there is such news, every day, and
Yeah.
it's a dramatic feeling.
Yeah.
Hey, Martin.
Yes, now
Martin,
Michael is all yours. Yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. So the overall market for the world, and let's assume, let's take tariffs as a factor we'll talk about later if necessary. But the overall market for vehicles, let's say, is 70 or 80 million, including light trucks, and we can compare the numbers. and the market growth is very good worldwide. So assuming the cars can be shipped all over the world, which they are, they can be made all over the world. There's one thing in Rich's pestle and in your four triggers that I would call the ostrich with its head in the sand, Martin. And I can show data. There's countless reports. Basically, Germany's market share, Germany is perhaps 4 million vehicles out of 80 million. So you're very,
Yes.
very, very small in market share. Now, when you're small in market share, factors like quality and customer satisfaction are very, very important, because you could drop your German production 25%, and the giants around the world would see that as a very minor shaking force in their competitive strategy. So I think my humble opinion is, Rich's five are great. Technology is what I want to talk about, and basically on design and quality and dealer activity. I think German car dealers around the world are amongst the worst to deal with compared to how Toyota treats customers, how US and Volkswagen is better than Audi or Mercedes. But I'll call it the snob appeal. The snob appeal of German cars is worn off. All right. The Lexus was a prime example how they attacked the E Series Mercedes and perhaps the 5 Series in Jurgen's company. So forgive me for saying so, but I've examined this, Martin. I sent you the 124 chassis versus the subsequent Mercedes, where the accountants ran the company and not the engineers. There hasn't been another chassis like the 124, and I think Jurgen would agree. So I think Germany are basically dragging the 5 suppliers like Bosch and ZF and Conti and the ones you mentioned. They're being dragged down to the abyss. Their quality could be great, but the overall vehicle customer satisfaction ratings are horrible worldwide, and they're getting worse. So I think Germany basically is giving away their car industry to the Japanese and others.
As you
and
mentioned,
China. So the
Germany
EV,
is building. Germany is
sorry,
building
Martin.
4 million cars per year on German soil.
Well,
Right?
again, all I want to say is that number is a very small market share. And the other big thing, you mentioned it so many times, is internal combustion engine versus hybrid versus EV. Now that's important because the 80 million vehicles are in fact shifting to more electric and more hybrid. So, the China onslaught, as I said, over the last couple of weeks, seems to be 2 liters and smaller. So you could get into the technology but I think overall, the quality story is killing Germany, and the lack of an EV activity that's superior to others, and hybrid activity. The hybrids and so forth that German companies are doing, unfortunately, are not competitive with the hybrids that other companies are doing. And on pure
Yeah.
EVs, China is the big threat that's going to kill Germany even further.
Okay. Let's recapitulate a bit. This is where I'm coming from. I'm actually not very much concerned about the worldwide car industry, because I can tell you, Volkswagen alone makes 1 million more vehicles worldwide than the total number of cars built on German soil. So total number of cars built on German soil last year was 3.8 million. But Volkswagen alone worldwide makes 4.8 million during the same time in 2025. And so I distinguish between the work or the labor done on German soil from the labor done in total in the car industry worldwide. And just for comparison, what I can tell you is I was at Chris Hering was here. I don't know whether he's here today, but he gave a talk, and he showed us data from China, and he said that one of a bigger factory in China, they produce 4 million cars per year in one single location, and that's more already than Germany makes that are made on German soil alone. And insofar, I'm talking more about what is happening in Germany. And the reason for doing so is not because I'm such a proud German, which I'm not, because I'm Bavarian. That's a minority in Germany or in Europe. And also, I'm no longer a German citizen for a long time already. So I'm not so much interested in that because I'm such a proud German who would promote Germany over all or so. But it's because for some reason I'm brought up in the German or German speaking culture, and many of the clients that I have access to, they are there and they speak German, and I'm preparing the Ride the Wave program already for a few years because I could foresee where all this is heading, and we are now getting into the zone where everything is desperate. And when you compare, this is why I do the comparison with the triggers. You compare the situation in the German car industry on German soil 3 years ago with the situation today, or only 2 years ago, Jürgen, today. I believe today the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, they really have bleeding necks, while 3 years ago or 2 years ago, it was not as serious as it is today. And that means that it's now the right time to start with the marketing to show these people that innovation can be done in a systematic way. And that's where we come in, because in autumn I'm starting the first program for the first batch of small and medium-sized enterprises with a revenue of you may laugh, right, of 2 or 3 million euros per year to maybe 10 or 15 million euros per year, and we offer them training in innovation, and that's where everything comes together. And again, why everything that I do here is for having in mind that this will one day come, and we are now at the one day. Now the one day has come, because it's now really bad, as Jürgen has confirmed, right?
Yes, definitely. 2 years ago, you heard this is, but nobody really cared. They said, "Oh well, we're sorry for the people, but let's go on." But now the situation has changed dramatically, and also the political situation. The party or the coalition, what is ruling Germany right now, has more than 70% disapproval of the people. So this is a perfect storm.
So, Martin, Jürgen, and I think there's yet another problem that at least I'm sensing and seeing and reading about, and that is the leading German companies are relocating more and more R&D and development work to relocate it to China.
Yes, of
You're
course.
perfectly, yes, and the German taxpayers pay for this. This is the real thing. Why people are getting so angry.
Yeah.
And moreover, now some of the factories in Europe are now building Chinese electric cars for Chinese car brands. And one is in just that came out yesterday. An Audi factory in East Germany is building Chinese electric vehicles, yeah, for the local market.
Yeah, to get away from the tariffs. This is what, and another thing what cracked me up. They're talking to Volkswagen. They are closing a couple of factories, and the Chinese have a stiff upper lip and say, well, it's a little bit old-fashioned, your factories.
Yeah, if Chris were here, Chris Hering he says that the factories in China, they don't even have a lighting system because the production runs in the dark. They have heavily invested into production facilities, and it's fully automated, he says. And In Germany, nothing is automated because for the past 7 years or so, nobody has invested anything into car manufacturing. So in Germany, the I don't know what is the average age of the car manufacturing facilities, but I believe it should be something like 30 years, also 40. But
I can't really, because there are a lot of remodeling, restructuring, and so on. They built up the Munich plant, for example, completely new. It's
okay,
brand new. So this is not the point, but we fell back with our unions. BMW is building their own PCBs, their own power electronics. They are building their own sometimes their batteries, sometimes not, but they're even assembling PCBs just to keep the workforce.
and which
Because of the
shouldn't be
unions.
done, right? Because
No.
a robot does a much better job in building assembling PCBs,
Exactly.
and you have less errors later, higher quality, lower costs. Reminds me to the early days in China, where I visited a friend, and he was the general manager of a factory that makes the valve springs for internal combustion engines. And those valve springs needed to be transported from one part of the factory to another part of the factory. And he wanted to install a conveyor belt for doing so, because it was the easiest and you have less labor. But then a member of the Communist Party showed up, a commissioner, and he said, no, that step must be done by humans. And then they introduced humans, and immediately the error rate went up by 10%. So, but he couldn't do differently because he had to hire those people. And today, this is no longer an issue because the population in China is also growing old. So I believe the average age of China is more than half of the Chinese are already beyond retirement age, which is 50 in China, not 60. And they have about one-child policy, and you can foresee that they run out of labor force, and so they need to automate. And when they see, oh, you want us to build our electric vehicles on those outdated machinery in your factory, in your Volkswagen factory, then I fully understand it, because it coincides with everything that I heard from China. Yeah. So my next question is, we know that there is about, I would say, 2 million workplaces in Germany in the Mittelstand, in the suppliers to the OEM manufacturers. I'm talking about German companies on German soil, right? In total, for the 8 million, or is it 3.4 million this year? I don't know, that they are going to build. There are roughly 800,000 working in the OEMs, in the car manufacturers themselves on German soil. Again, everything I say is on German soil. And for each workplace in the OEMs, there are 3 workplaces in the suppliers. And again, it doesn't mean 3 full-time workplaces, but 3 workplaces that somehow work for the German car industry, maybe even 5 hours per week only or so. But there are 3 times more, which is 2.4 million or 3 million people who work indirectly for the German car industry. Or yeah, it could be directly or indirectly. And I can see that this number will decline dramatically, because there are more factories closed than repurposed for building Chinese vehicles. And of course, it doesn't mean that all those 3 million supplier workplaces will then become unemployed, because some of them would retire, some of them would leave Germany. and some of them would do other works. I mean, some of those small suppliers, they maybe they work for 3 or 4 big clients, and only one is in the car industry, and the others are doing something else. But I believe that there would be more and more companies that now find out that they would lose the revenues if they don't use the capabilities and the production means for something else. And that means directly innovation. And innovation comes in two different tastes, I would say. First one is product development, and the other one is market development. And my plan is to give them both, like two pillars they need to build on. And it's about attracting 20 companies by October, and number one, enroll them into a program where we guide them to better understand innovation, and that would also come with a lecture or the lecture material in TUM Asia, and also it would come with weekly online meetings that would guide them through something like a mastermind group that I have in mind, but for a long time. And the second part of it, the second leg would is to bring them to Singapore and to show them how to find a cooperation partner in Malaysia or in Vietnam or in Indonesia or even in South China if they want. And that would be 1 week after the Formula One in Singapore. I have the dates since last week only, and all the local organizations that have to do with Germans, they start to prepare for that week. For example, there's the the Chamber of Commerce, the German Singapore Chamber of Commerce, the German Malaysia Chamber of Commerce. Then I have the 2 embassies, the German embassy in Malaysia and the one in Singapore, and then a few others like the TUM Asia is mentioned, which has a campus here. So that's the big picture. And again, I've seen that coming for 3 years already, and we now have all those not half-eaten but 90% eaten cheese wedges that make the whole program. But I believe that we will get it done by October so that we can take in the first batch, and then the year after we would have the second batch. And yeah, so I'm putting the team together. I just wanted to let you know because I'm quite sure that you also want to be part of that. You can see an outline of what is to come when you are in front of a computer. You type martin-schweiger.com, and then you would see the landing page. It starts, escape the industrial collapse. martin-schweiger.com.
Say, Martin, the 2 to 50 million euro companies, or 2 to 15 that are your targets. I think
Correct.
they're kind of at the beck and call of their customers, the OEs, and even the third tier serving the second tier, first tier, so they could be selling piece parts to Bosch, who then sells a fuel
Yes.
pump to Audi or whatever. So, your effort is very notable, but I think a lot of these companies are kind of helpless, and I think the labor comments that you've made, the least cost country, I think the German labor market is basically not competitive with all the people in Hungary and elsewhere that are willing to build not only the components but the full car. So I think it's just so many forces that are making Germany non-competitive. And again, I want to overlay the quality story, and not only that, the customer relations story. Experience of customers here in the U.S. are well documented on all the YouTube channels, with their experience with German cars in the service shops. And the labor rates are high, the attitudes of the service managers are horrible, and basically Germany is chasing away customers. And your targets of the small SMEs, they're basically are victims of circumstance. So your efforts are very notable, but I think they're still going to come away kind of helpless with all the mega forces active at the five German car companies.
Yeah, sure. I can hear you, and in general that is true. But the Pareto principle applies, right? And which means 20% of those companies will make 80% of the impact. And also 20% of 20% of the companies there will make 80% of 80%, which is 64% of the impact. And 20% of 20% of 20%, which is 0.8% of the companies there, will make 80% of 80% of 80% is roughly 50%. So, and what is required is to find those 1%, 1 in 100, that will be part of the 50%. So even if the market halves, there would still be 1 in 100 companies that would be able to do the transition. And we are looking for
Martin,
those.
if your push is innovation at these companies and the 1% of serial innovators, I think Rich could tell you the Eldar story, that the high growth new technologies, I think the five German car companies, as I've come to know them, they have a very strong not invented here. So they might look to Bosch or Continental for new ideas.
Yeah.
But to ask those companies to look down to third tier companies that are only 15 million euros, I think they'll go to those companies for commodities, nuts and bolts and connectors or whatever. But I don't think the customer is going to look to them for innovation. And if they do, they're going to have this big NIH, not invented here. So the small companies are kind of, again, victims of circumstance. Even if they're highly innovative, they're going to fall on
I've
deaf
seen
ears.
many companies that were in bad shape, and there were young people in their 30s or even 40s, and they took the broken parts together, took some money from whoever, the grandmother or the mother in one case, and then they went for a new product for which they saw a market, and they tried it out. They used the 4x4 approach in a simplified form, because I'm doing that for a very long time, and they became market leaders. And
Can you give some examples for the group, Martin? Can you give examples of the serial
yeah,
innovator at the SME who
just
the new
one
technology?
of my famous one. I can say now because he's retired and gave the shop to his daughter. Is a company called Meltem. Mike Echo Lima Tango Echo Mike. All right? So I inherited that company from another patent attorney, 1996. That's 30 years ago. And at that time, the company was in bad shape. They built venting devices for bathrooms. At that time were required. When you build a new building, you must have a venting device, especially when the bathroom doesn't have a window. So is an electric motor with a fan and a small housing, and there would be a duct that you Americans, you know that better because this technology comes from the US. In Germany, you wouldn't build a duct into a house 30 years ago. But anyway, that was there already, and then at one point in time they became more energy savvy, and then they said, okay, we can see that buildings must be more efficient because we have this oil crisis, and we all know that. Do you remember that there was a peak oil theory? We were all taught that crude oil would run out in the year of 2000. I remember. So
Yes.
and so we had to heat our houses with less oil, which makes sense anyway because saving energy is always good. And he could see that there would be a need for houses, for housing, that you exchange the heat from the outgoing airstream to the incoming airstream. And then he was the first one who built in his little workshop prototypes. And I was the one who patented them. And and some 8 years later, the the lawmakers made it compulsory to have a heat exchanger in the bathroom venting devices. And also there was a requirement that you had to build the buildings airtight, which means that when you pump air into it, there must be a certain pressure built up. So there were no more air leaks allowed in houses in Germany. And his device was the only one that could exchange the air, and means venting the houses without that pressure to be under exceeded, not achieved. And even more so with those requirements for the airtightness of the houses, the mold in the houses increased. And his device, together with another device that was not as sophisticated as his, was the only one that could prevent the mold from happening. And I even put one of those devices into the basement of my father's house. And the basement was quite stinky because there was always some moisture coming up from the earth and some mold. And with this device, suddenly he could turn a basement room into a living room or a bedroom for guests. No more smell. So I have seen this happening under my own eyes within only 10 years. And if you remember, the time after 1997 was not really good. There was the Asian currency or the Asian monetary crisis in 1997, and there was the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000. And then there was, just the year after, there was a 9/11, and we were in a deep recession until the year of 2003. And in those years, he had the advantage of having low costs because labor was cheap in Germany at that time, and also he had capital from his mother, and he built a very small company, Meltem at the time, from the old technology, only one way, no heat exchanging, into the market leader of two-way heat exchanging building ventilation devices. So I've seen that, and that was not the only one. It's just one of the many stories that I've seen. But I must say, I have also seen a lot of bankruptcies. So that's why I've written the 4x4, because I was so depressed when again another startup went bankrupt. But so this company was not meant to survive in the Meltem company, but it did, and it became the market leader. And all that from a small workbench in a very old in an old stable, an old farm building with a stable, and the owner of the younger owner in his 30s, he used that old workshop. By the way, he's a trained car mechanic. Yeah, a trained car mechanic, has not even a degree.
Say, Mark,
And
back in the 70s in the US, they put heat exchangers on clothes dryers. So the amount of waste heat that goes out of a building from a gas or electric dryer is perhaps 100 times the value of the BTUs versus what your example is giving. So ambient air, at 70 degrees, it's nice to capture some of the heat, but the efficiency and, so the overall heat requirements of the home might be improved by 1% by capturing the waste heat of an exhaust fan duct. But if you capture the heat from your clothes dryer with 80% efficiency, that can save 10% on the heating cost when
Michael,
the dryer
please
is
come
running.
to the point. What is it that you want to say?
What I'm trying to say is you said his idea came out in the 90s. In the US, it was done for 100 times more impact on clothes dryers in 1970. Why wasn't he in the clothes dryer market?
Because it's not easy and obvious to apply this
Well,
principle.
the heat exchanger is very simple. On a 4-inch piece of ductwork, you put a
Michael,
set
you were not
heat
there.
exchanger.
with hindsight, it's always so easy to say that is not inventive, and I hear it all the time. I hear
It's not
what
it's
you
not
say.
hindsight. It's not
Yes, it
hindsight,
is.
Martin. It's a fact that invention was done 30 years earlier in the US.
Believe me, we patent attorneys, we encounter the same effect all the time. The people want to tell us that a certain patent should not have been granted because it was obvious.
No, he
And
probably cited it in prior art, so his patent might only cover bathroom fans and not clothes dryers. I'm sure you could
oh,
get a
what I want,
patent.
but the next thing is, without getting defensive or offensive, people often confuse a patent as an indicator for a product being good. It's not, says the patent attorney. The only indicator whether a product is good or not is if you make a lot of profit with it. That's the foremost important indicator. And even a product that may appear as less inventive or not so novel or whatever, how you call it, whatever you say, it doesn't matter. If you can make a profit with it, it's a good product. And there are a few other criteria that apply. I mean, as an engineer, you would always also have some ethics, means that you're not wasting energy, for example. But somehow that goes without saying for me, being an engineer. So we were always trained to work with resources in mind, and we should be efficient. It's never something you wouldn't build something that would exploit the environment just in order to make profit. When you see that animals and humans are dying just for making profit, no, at least where I am from, no engineer would do that. To the contrary.
We would do that in the
I-
United States all year long. If it makes
Mhm.
profit and it
Martin,
kills things, yeah, we'll do it.
I would
I
also
don't think
offer
so.
that payback on Melton's device could be 12 years. Payback on the dryer device is as quick as 1 year. So the economics of putting the heat
Yeah.
capture on your exhaust fan, it's like, it reminds me of, you've seen revolving doors on commercial buildings. People
Mm.
spend $10,000 more on a revolving door. The payback on revolving doors is like 30 years. It's really a dumb thing to do. They say, oh well, you don't have the heat going in and out when people come in and out of the door. That's less than a half
Uh,
of 1% of the heat load or air conditioning in a building.
what
So
what
payback
I
is
can
very
tell
important.
you, what I can tell you at the peak, when the housing industry was, when everything was into making old houses um, adapt to the new energy requirements, the Meltem was the market leader and also the best device in the market. Others, the market has changed since then. Also in Germany and in Europe, the housing is no longer as strong as it was 10 years ago. So that may change. But all what I want to say, you asked me for an example, and I have given you one. And I can give you dozens of other similar things. And because I have seen it working, I'm confident to tell people what they should avoid uh, in order to not go bankrupt when they innovate. And I believe that the 1% of those um, um, 3 million workplaces that are in danger now because of the decline of the German car industry in Germany, that 1% can be saved and they can become very strong in what follows after the current crisis. And these are the people I'm looking for. And I'm very confident that we will find them. And I know already how they look like. When I drive onto their premises, I would know for what to look. I can see them, and I can distinguish. Just to give another example, I cannot say the name. Another client of mine, I spoke with him last week. He used the low interest rates that you all know that we had for the past 20 years, because the banks helped to cover up for the crashes that we went through for the past 20 years, the many ones. I'm speaking now about Europe, but I don't think that in the US is so much different. At one point in time, we had even negative interest rates. I've never heard that before, seen that before. And he has used these negative interest rates to build up a company structure that relied heavily on real estate. At one point in time, he's 5 years my junior. At one point in time, he was 250 million euros heavy in real estate. Of course, he didn't have the 250 million in cash, right? But the balance sheet was 250 million in real estate. And against those 250 million in real estate, there were for sure, I don't know, 240 million or 200, I don't know, something like that. And he lost the 250 million within 1 year. And before he told me, well, I thought that with 250 million in real estate, it can't go wrong for the rest of my life. And he's now down to 700,000. Yeah, 700,000. And the 700,000 is not on his bank account, but is written invoices, and he hopes that he gets paid for that. So I've really seen a lot. And I can, but I don't want to say that I can predict the future, but when I went to this client on the client's premises 10 years ago, I could see that and feel that little, I don't know, there's no good word that can translate what you say in German to that, but we have a very fine feeling if something is not fully true, if something has a bit fake, not fully fake that you would see it, but you see clues that cannot be as it is. And the reason why he lost all this was because at one point in time the interest rates switched from very low or negative to only 2 or 3%. And at that point in time, he needed $8 million in cash for paying the banks the interest rate for 1 year. And he didn't have that. And then he tried to find another bank to give him the cash for paying the interest, and it didn't work. So he had to file for insolvency, which he did. And there was a reason why he collapsed. And for some reason, I could feel that. But I never looked into the balance sheet, of course. But why do I know all this? Because when someone files bankruptcy and there are trademarks or patents involved, the insolvency liquidator would always talk with the patent attorney, which is me. And yeah, that's how I learned it. And I believe that experience can help the German Mittelstand, those small 2 million, 3 million to 15 million euros tremendously, because I believe there is the seed of the next big thing that will come from Germany. And although you're pessimistic, Michael, I'm not, I must say.
Hey, Martin.
Yes.
This is Roach. In the last couple minutes here, can you give us an update on Credentialix?
Yeah, yeah, very close to the token white paper, the token agreement, and the next two are already lining up for the same thing. And currently we need an FTO, which is a very important part, and the FTO prevents us from going to jail if the Singapore government finds out that we issue blockchain tokens for the pre-sales. And the sales, the token purchase agreement must comply with the law in Singapore. And currently we are there. But I could see the progress already. So the lawyers are currently working on that, and it's going back and forth. I believe we're very close.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very cool. If that flies, I can tell you. I just show a few of the people that ask for advice. Hey, do you want to do pre-sales on that? and then they look at the yeah. I have one inventor. He's using AI for a medical application, and I told him I showed him the Credentialix website, and he was very excited. He immediately understood the thing, and I'm thinking also to pair it with a application for government subsidies that fund startups, because then if that application is granted, then we have an indicator that the third party has reviewed the project and the business plan, and we take over from there and just make sure that we manage the innovation such that it goes through the stage gate, so that you have a little insight of what is going on, and it's not really unmonitored. So that would take away the responsibility for the qualifications of the projects from the Credentialix team, and makes it also a bit more credible, I believe.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting.
Yeah, and especially once the first Credentialix thing is here, then we will also include those founders into the 4x4 here, because they need to learn how to manage innovation. They always make the same mistakes. It's always the same. Yeah, everything into R&D, and short before they go public with a product, then they only try to find out whether the market really wants it. And FTO is never done because it's so expensive, but they want patents because the investors want to see patents. And I find this so frustrating. You know, it's not bad for me because I'm a patent attorney, and at least they think that we are important. But if I don't see a success, then that frustrates me deeply. Yeah. Yeah. So we are at the end of the 4x4 this week. Thanks for coming again after last week's disaster with the Malaysian telecom network. And I'm really so grateful because I learn a lot from you and the questions and what we do. Thank you all, and see you next week again. And goodbye.
Take care.
So long.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.